Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professional and provide practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hi, I am Justin Daniels. I am a shareholder and corporate M&A and tech transaction lawyer at the law firm Baker Donaldson, advising companies in the deployment and scaling of technology. Since data is critical to every transaction, I help clients make informed business decisions while managing data privacy and cybersecurity risk, and when needed, I lead the legal cyber data breach response brigade.
And this episode is brought to you by Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, e-commerce, professional services, and digital media. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more and to check out our best-selling book, Data Reimagined, Building Trust One Bite at a Time, visit redcloveradvisors.com. Well, hello. We're recording on a Monday, fresh off of a weekend.
Yes, and while I was reading my intro, you were scrolling the screen, making it hard for me to read.
I didn't even think I was doing that. I'm so sorry, but you should kind of have that memorized by now.
Yes, I've done it a few times.
Like a few hundred. I've kind of lost track. We're over 200 now. Oh. So you're supposed to just know what it is.
I see.
It's just like a reminder.
I think that should be part of the raise I should be getting.
You know what? Should we make it really big print for you next?
Fair enough. Well, why don't we introduce our guest today, who we both know through different ways.
It's true. Yes. But you can have the fun of introducing.
So today we have Bob Jett, who's the Global Chief Privacy Officer for Bunge, where he leads the global privacy initiatives and supports key projects in digital transformation, AI, and data management. Hello, Bob. How are you?
I'm well, Justin. Thank you for having me. Hi, Jody.
Well, hello. So we always like to know how people got to the role that they are in now. So tell us a little bit about your career journey.
I was tasked with building, when I relocated back from living in Europe to going to Iowa for the company I was working with at the time, the GC said, "What do you know about building a data center?" And I said, "Nothing." And he said, "Perfect, you're the guy for me." So I started and built my first data center, and then really enjoyed the people that I worked with and was able to sort of take the compliance legal work I was doing and develop it into working with the data nerds, if you will, who were building the data centers and policies and managing all the stuff, and really liked it. And I've stayed with it now, coming up on 30 plus years. So.
Well, that is quite a career trajectory of a long time starting in something that you didn't know, which is exciting. That means you were willing to take a challenge and learn, which we just have to continuously learn, I feel like, every day, because it's going faster and faster with new areas we need to understand.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, it was very unique. It was quite a lot of understanding, but it also is fun when you have, as I'm sure you do, is you have people that are talking about, now we're back to data centers. And that's been the fun and interesting part, is thinking about the fact that this was something we were working on 30 plus years ago. And now we're back to building these massive data centers again, after we go into AS400s and then blade servers and then virtual servers. But now we're back to the old standard.
AS400 brings me back to companies that I would audit in my financial statement audit days. And I remember all these companies having AS400. Oh my goodness, I hadn't thought of that in a really long time.
Yeah.
So, Bob, your company operates in a really complicated global food supply chain, and it would be great to get your perspective around how your privacy and security program has evolved to address this increasing regulatory cyber privacy risk across different jurisdictions around the world.
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, I'm a product of that of focus, I think, which is they reached out to me about 3 years ago, and I was the first ever privacy officer for Bunge. So there was, so it's nice to be able to get in there and sort of set the bar and set the standards for what we're doing. There were some regional folks that were focused on privacy, mainly around employee data. For those of everybody who don't know Bunge, it's not a name anybody really recognizes, which I kind of like as a privacy officer, because when the old obfuscation is the best privacy. If you don't know about it, you don't know it. But we're one of the world's largest agribusinesses, and by that it means we collect or we purchase grain or soybeans or other products from farmers directly, and we transport them to milling or other kinds of plants, or we just transport them to other buyers around the world. So we have about 400 different facilities globally in 52 countries. So yeah, it's a very complex. The good news is that, well, the good is we're not consumer facing. So I don't have the challenges having faced them before. And I know you have other clients that do, which is consumer privacy. Most of the regulations and laws we deal with, although they are privacy data protection laws, are very sort of consumer leaning. Shall we just call it consumer leaning? Where we've really been focused on is understanding, like you said, the regulatory and cybersecurity. One of the things that I really always impressed with about Bunge is the commitment to cybersecurity. There's a dedicated team that basically we have a call with everybody around the world every morning for about half an hour. And so it's real-time threat, vulnerability, and status updates on a daily basis. So it's really very unique. I've not seen that with other companies where you get on the phone with, get on a Teams call with all your colleagues and sort of talk about the state of the union in real time. So that's kind of a unique feature. And that also helps us, certainly helps me to begin to prioritize and look at, okay, what are the tactical issues that I need to tackle on a day-to-day basis, but what are some of the strategic considerations? And you and I have spoken about some of those. How do we start to pull those strategic considerations into building out a better framework and updating the framework as the regulations and the laws changes?
Companies are always asking about how privacy and security can work together. It sounds like in this scenario, there's a really nice collaboration with, this weekly call, and there's probably, I imagine, a variety of other ways that you all are connecting. Is there maybe a tip that you would offer for someone listening who doesn't have that weekly call and they really would like to work more closely with them?
One of the things I insisted on in the last 3 companies I worked with was I moved my office into the IT area. So I didn't have my office in the legal and compliance, because let's face it, nobody voluntarily walks up to the legal and compliance area. They just don't. I don't care. I don't care what you're told. I don't know anybody that voluntarily goes there, because it's big and scary and it's full of lawyers and compliance people. And it usually means I've done something wrong. So what I did was I basically have asked and said, just give me a cube or give me an office or whatever is available. Please put me in the middle of that. And I think doing that, you're not the legal and compliance guy. You're just another colleague who's working on the IT team. So that's been very helpful for this and I also make an effort to join the town halls, to get an invite to be a part of the conversations with the people that are there. And and just reach out to people and develop the relationships. And that's the secret sauce, I think, to my capabilities with the various companies I've worked for, is just developing the relationships where you get that call, hey, I have a question, which comes into there may be a problem, right? So there's always that sort of, I have a question. So that's really the tip, is don't be afraid to go and interact directly or be a part of the IT team or whatever. And then the other part of that team, I would say the other big relationship is with the internal audit team, because there's going to be specifically, an IT lead or an IT director for your internal audit team. Make sure you understand what they perceive as the weak points or improvement points for the cybersecurity and the privacy program at the company. That's going to help you a lot in terms of designing the right framework, and then also being told, ahead of time where things are happening.
That's
So
a
those are
really
probably the
great
two
tip
biggest tips. Yeah.
for people is to truly embed if you have a physical office and you can do that. And I would imagine for those who don't, or they're remote, or there's people all over the world, then the suggestion of, and we've had multiple people really talk about kind of that roadshow and being a part of the different groups. You have to get out, even if it's virtual or in person, somehow get to know people.
I would agree. I mean, any chance I can get to combine and do, like you said, a roadshow or just do a meet and greet. It's always tough to get the money to travel internationally as overhead in the corporate environment. But usually I try to make sure that you have a discussion, you have a roadshow, and there's some payoff for it. So yeah.
So, in the vein of privacy and security, what areas do you think privacy and security are impacting customers and suppliers, especially as data sharing becomes so critical as your company continues to expand?
So I think for us, I mean, the one of the areas that we're focused on most, as you probably heard about, is ESG, so environmental sustainability and governance, right? That's a big thing, certainly huge in Europe, coming soon to the United States and Canada. We're starting to see situations on that. So part of that sustainability is also the phrase that we use a lot, which is called traceability. So for farmers and growers, one of the situations you have is, how can you certify to me as the purchaser of the goods you're selling me that your farmer that you bought this from didn't burn down a part of the Amazon forest to plant the crops that you just harvested, because that's not in support of a sustainable solution. And so part of that is starting to think about the kind of data points we're collecting from the farmers, the data points that we need to have to validate against, for example, the EU deforestation regulation. That's a requirement if you're moving goods or processing goods in EU that come from other jurisdictions. You're going to have to be able to do some traceability obligations and things like that. So that's a lot of the data there. The other data too is just on the logistics and just understanding. It's like kind of the combination of the know your client, compliance with, who are you, who's the end person that's getting this grain, or getting whatever we're shipping, whether it's oil or grain. And then how do we know that that's the right person, that it's not being subject to some sanctions? There's a lot of geopolitical stuff that impacts our business daily in terms of, one day we can ship into Syria, as an example, that came up the other week. One day where we can't ship to Syria. Now, today we can. Probably by tomorrow we won't be able to. So it really does change almost daily in terms of, and then part of that too is making sure that we're following the proper rules and regulations in terms of what data we can collect and what data we can share about the end consumers and the transport modalities for that as well. So that's probably some of the bigger areas. The other area really that we focus on a lot too is your employee population. How do you start to get good data points on your employee population? That's always changing. There's always the inclusion. There's always, equity and inclusion. How do you manage that? How do you communicate? As you know, different jurisdictions allow you to collect certain data points. Other jurisdictions do not. In fact, in some countries, it's against the law to actually collect certain data points, like ethnicity is one. In certain countries, you're not permitted to inquire about that. Other countries, you are. So managing the employee data, making sure people understand how that data is accessed by third parties, or how you're engaging with third parties where you're providing that data is also a key thing that we work on from a privacy and data protection perspective.
It's so interesting because I think so many people don't think about an agribusiness like yourself having all those different data points. And I really appreciate how you've shared that so many different kinds of companies really do, especially, of course, from an employee standpoint. But to even do the business you're in, you're trying to gather more data points, which some of those might be considered personal information. Really, really fascinating. which then means you might be using some AI tools to help you manage those data points. And you mentioned internal audit might be having some frameworks they're using. Can you share a little bit about maybe the kinds of AI governance frameworks that companies can use to help them manage the data and those tools responsibly and securely?
Yeah. I mean, and I admit this is going to be I think I've seen some of your postings, Jody, and this is really a call to you, which is it's still the privacy foundations. I love the fact that AI is really not that complicated. It's the same foundation because it's basically data, which is what privacy and data protection is all about, which is what's your data inventory? Have you mapped your data flow? Have you been looking at, and that's really, as you look back on, I've done recent presentations and discussions is, what are we, responsible AI is all about that. It's really just about what's your data quality? How are you managing the data sets that you're creating? And when you're using this data in an AI format, do you really know, why you collected it, what purpose you originally collected it for? Are any additional purposes been authorized in the process of you collecting the data? Sort of the basics around privacy and data protection that, the professionals have been doing it for years sort of know. So that's sort of usually my first lead into people in discussions is to say, this is nothing new, or it certainly shouldn't be anything new. The other point in AI that I always try to make to people is when we first start talking about it, say, well, let's hang on a second. When you say AI, what do you mean? And they sort of look at you sideways and they're like, what do you mean? What do I mean? It's like, well, are you talking about the AI that's in your phone, like Siri and Alexa? Or are you talking about, generative AI, or are you talking about agentic AI? So which of those are we talking about here? Because there are unique risks and unique things to consider for each of those. So that's where I think you need to look at. Is I think it really goes back to in thinking about talking with you. I was thinking about it's really just the privacy basics, which is, do you have good information on your data? Because that's the fuel, if you will, for the AI engines. And if you know what kind of fuel, then you're going to know what, I hate to use the car analogy, but you know what kind of mileage you're going to get and how far you're going to be able to get on that data and what the output should be. So
in data out, really, you can't do any of this if you don't know the data, which is why we constantly say, know your data, know your data, know your data. Oh, we can make a song. Know your data, know your data. All right, I won't keep singing. I did actually sing once on the podcast.
Yes, I know, and I told you to. So, Bob, I was thinking, something you said at the outset, and Jody said it too, is, you went in and had to learn the data center business, and you're like, didn't know anything about it. And then Jody talked a little bit about being lifelong learners. And I wonder if you could just share with our audience, AI is something new that we've all had to learn a little bit about, and just love to get your perspective of what your process was, or where do you go to find resources so you can learn more about the technology, as well as, the privacy, security, or other issues that might impact how you advise on use cases or governance or that kind of thing.
Yeah. I will say I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn and really the law firm offerings that are out there. I think there's some really good information on that. I think the NIST AI standards that came out and the NIST documents are really helpful because, again, it plays right into what we've been talking about is NIST has had sort of the cybersecurity out there for a while and the NIST controls, and they're really just building on that, with regard to AI, which I would argue just kind of supports the discussion we were having, which is sort of saying it's not any different than what you've been doing, but here's how you can use those controls and start to apply it. There's lots of great resources out there. And I think you're right. I think you need to make sure that you're, if you will, that you're drinking from the cup that is all about the technology cup, which is, what is this technology? What is agentic AI? I would really advise people to start reading up on that real quick. That is coming quicker than I think anybody imagined. You've got Gemini, you've got OpenAI, you've got a whole bunch of new platforms that are talking about agentic AI. And the idea that you can have an autonomous that you can create within an AI platform an autonomous set of directions that's going to act for you as your agent, hence the word agentic AI. Good and bad so far from that. You've probably seen some of the articles, is that there's probably some good and fair uses for that, but there's also some really scary stuff. Some use cases that I've heard people like, it was like, book me a plane ticket, and it buys, of course, a first class ticket and takes the person around the world the wrong way, $30,000 plane ticket to get what should have been like a $1,000 plane ticket to get to a spot. So I think there's understanding the technology and how the biggest thing too is, how do users interface? The other big thing that we spend a lot of time on in the working group that I have with my company is understanding prompts and prompt engineering and prompt, in the agreements we have with certain people, are you giving people access to the prompts? Okay, maybe I'm not using data to train the models anymore, but I'm giving you access to the prompts, which is what, as you know, what they call fine tuning. So I'm not training the models now, but with the information that are in the prompts, I can actually fine tune some of the responses, which is the same. So the other thing, the biggest one that I get back to, Justin, honestly, is this idea, responsible AI to me is, it's kind of it's a term that's hard to put your arms around, but at the end of the day, I was asked the other day, is like, what does that mean? I'm like, what it really means, you are responsibly developing and deploying AI using data that is quality, has quality and integrity. That's responsible AI. So to me, I should say to me. So.
Well, it's interesting you brought up the point about the prompts, because one of the interesting things I've learned is you don't interact directly with an LLM. You interact with it through an API. And so your prompts are going into software that then processes it to access the LLM. And, for a company like yours, or maybe a publicly traded company, those prompts could have material non-public information or confidentiality. And I'm thinking, if I'm putting on my hacker hat, which you have to deal with too, I might want to get into a company and get unauthorized access to those prompts, because that may really give me window. Or if you're keeping the responses, so now you have to think, okay, how do I operationalize this in terms of, maybe we have it automatically deletes, because that's one of the things I learned. Actually, I'd love for you to share the story about how you thought about handling, hey, we all want to have AI note takers and all that stuff, but just love to get your perspective on how you start to, hey, how do we operationalize this from a confidentiality, privacy? Because if I didn't know the technology, I wouldn't know how to ask that or even think about that issue.
And I think you're right. That's where I've talked, to other people in my area. I think a lot of us are going to, you either need to tell me you're encrypting it, and you need to identify specifically what levels of encryption you're using and how you're using it, who has access to it, all the things we look at. Or you just need to have something in there that says it's going to be deleted, and we have the right to review or audit about how it's being deleted for the prompts. Yeah. The other question and remind me, I apologize, I went off on the other question you had for me.
The first time you and I met, we were talking about AI note takers.
Oh, that's right.
And whatnot. You came up with a really, I thought, great idea on how to address that without saying no, but putting guardrails around it. And I was hopeful you could share that with our audience.
Yeah. So, we did that, and we sort of turned that into somewhat of a company policy, so that, depending upon who the audience is, we can say, look, our policy is not to allow auto note takers on there, because typically when you enter a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting, you'll see something that is very sort of generic hanging up in the corner, and you can ask about that. What I think what you're referring to is, we said, okay, if you have somebody that says that, what I said to them is, okay, then you please send to me a copy of the transcript, so that please put me on the distribution so that I get a copy of the transcript. And that way I get a chance to review it before it would be used or used internally by you. So give me an opportunity to look at that. And if I don't like it, then I'm going to tell you I don't like it, and has information in there that should not be shared, and please delete it. So that's sort of the approach we've taken, is that sort of, if you won't turn it off, then I get rights, because it is recording and taking notes of a conversation that I'm a party to, and we can go down the rabbit hole of wiretap statutes if you'd like. But and then converse. But interestingly enough, Justin, I found out recently that if you ask nicely about just turning it off, it's kind of switched recently where I think people are kind of like, oh yeah, we'll just turn it off. So I haven't had to use my sort of, hey, I'll be nice about it. Send me the transcript. Let's talk about it. Approach very much anymore. I just say, would you mind if we turn that off? And they're like, yeah, sure, click, and it's off. So,
Well, I remember another thing we had talked about where people could do it, but the transcript was deleted in 24 hours. So you'd have to go and take it and then revise it because it was just going to be deleted. And that's just the process.
and
I
we
also thought
and we
that
do
would
that. Yeah, I mean that's good. Thank you for that. So we do that with internal Teams meetings still. So in other words, if I record an internal Teams meeting, our default is 24 hours if you're transcribing it. If you're recording it and it's, I forget, but if it's a meeting for training related and you have to tag it in that way, then you're allowed, but it only stays active for 30 days and then it's deleted after 30 days. The idea being that the person will, the people that were invited that didn't make it, or somebody who wants to go back and hear it again, has got a limited time period in which to do that, and then it goes away.
And just in case everyone listening may or may not know, there are some of these note takers that you don't even know are in the meeting now. They're completely behind the scenes. They don't show up with the actual note taker. There's no message. There's nothing of notice unless the other side is being kind and thoughtful, and something to consider and put in part of your policy and your training. And do you need to ask, are those okay in some meetings, not okay in other meetings? But that's the direction some of these are going.
And obviously it gets, we get, to your point, Jody, we do get more comfortable if if it's an NDA, if you have an NDA in place, then obviously the conversation is going to be subject to the NDA, and you hope that everybody understands and respects the terms and conditions of the NDA.
So when you are not studying various AI note takers or managing employee privacy globally and working on AI governance frameworks, what do actually, no, I was going to ask, what do you like to do for fun? So I'm going to do that because that's where I was going, and you can ask the privacy and security tip because I'm reversing the order here. I'm reversing the order. So you're going to tell me what you like to do for fun, and then Justin's going to ask our privacy security tip because we always ask those two questions, and Jody messed up the order.
I like it. I used to be, these days I really honestly enjoy cooking and wine. So I'm not quite the wine snob, but I'm working on becoming a wine snob. It's been something I've been doing a long time. I used to be a very active sailor and really enjoyed sailing, so that was sort of my passion for a long, long time. Now with my wife, who's an equestrian, I spend most of my time helping her to pack her car and going to watch her ride. So I will say it's devolved from food and wine and horses, not necessarily in that order. So
that all sounds fun. I like food, I like wine, and my daughter likes horses. So
there you go.
I've learned to like horses and enjoy getting hugs from them.
And our last question.
Yes, this is yours now.
After Jody.
I'm gonna mix it up a little bit here.
Yes. Cue the eye roll. So, Bob, from all of your years of experience, do you have a favorite privacy or security tip that you would like to share with our audience?
I think the tip we talked about a little bit was find a way to engage. Don't just talk to lawyers. Find a way to engage with other people, whether it's in your HR or your audit. That's my tip. And then the other tip that's really been successful to me is just transparency, that you want to be as transparent and communicate as directly and effectively as you can. I mean, and obviously as lawyers and in positions where we are, there may be information or reasons you can't do it, but you should try, because I think that good, effective, transparent communication always comes back really, really well and really, really helps you, because you can, nobody's going to ask you, hey, well, you said this day and this the other day. You just keep that sort of transparent, consistent story. It's really helpful.
Well, we are so glad that you joined us today. If people would like to connect and learn more, where should they go?
They can reach me on LinkedIn. My profile's out there. I think it's under Robert Jett, so don't be confused. So Bob Jett is my evil twin alias, but no, it's under Robert Jett. And I'd be happy to talk to people there. I have a lot of contacts there, and be happy to share any information.
Well, again, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.